Thanks for staying tuned. Without further ado, let's get straight into the discussions making the rounds as we look to review issues in the news on the program today. Now, making headlines is a decision of President Bola Tinubu to reinstate the executive and legislative arms of government in Rivers State following the expiration of the initial 6 months state of emergency. Now, it's a lot of mixed reactions making the rounds, but overarchingly, it's the excitement greeting the government house in Rivers. Oh, joining in the studio on the program today is our reviewer who will be looking at the stories together, Mr. Ben Agunloye. Mr. Ben, good morning to you.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to have you in the studio. Now, a lot of people call this a restoration of democratic rule. Criticisms in some sorts with a call of probe of the interim government by the People's Democratic Party, PDP particularly. But for you, how monumental is this in terms of what would shape the history of Nigeria's democracy in the years to come?
Well, just before the emergency rule came up, the troubles and I think the crisis in the state was getting out of control. Yes, anybody might think, oh, we having upper hand or not having upper hand. The reality is that there was no proper governance in the state, and the people were the one bearing the real brunt of the crisis. So, bringing back the democratic institution, I think, is to the benefit of all, because these are elected representatives of the people. And as for those calling for probe, usually I don't have issues with probe. We talk about accountability and transparency, but you don't focus so much on that as to deprive governance the instrument of going forward. I would always insist that while you don't ignore the past, I think the more important thing is for us to look at how did we get into the crisis? What can we do to ensure that as a state, another round of crisis does not arise? So proper governance and going forward, in my opinion, should be the immediate focus of the government and of the people of Rivers State. Yes, should there be questions if there were errors or malpractices or financial recklessness? Yes, there should be questions. But that is not more important than taking care of what is left.
But for the PDP, technically calling for a probe would mean probing the National Assembly, who had oversight of River States under the care of the sole administration, and by extension a probe of the executive, talking about the office of the president. Is that not correct, sir?
Well, that's what I'm saying, that what is more important now is moving the state forward. Nobody will discountenance probe or no probe. I am not against probe, but I am saying that probing or doing anything at all should not take precedence over restoration of governance and ensuring that the people of Rivers get the dividend of democracy. Now, basically, I would always insist that when you drive a car, the windscreen is big, but there is a rear mirror. The fact that there is a rear mirror means you need to have a view of the past, but your view and concern for the past should not be more important than what is ahead of you. And what is ahead of the state is development, is giving dividend of democracy to the people. And that should be the priority of the Fubara administration when he sat back on that seat from today. Like I said, we're not discountenancing the fact that there couldn't have been things done in error. But take note also that it was an emergency period, as the law states it. So a number of processes and procedures might not have been followed. But questioning that is proper, is appropriate, but it must not take away the priority of governance from today going forward.
Now, let's look at the past using the analogy of the rearview mirror. Let's look beyond River State. It's one of those proclamations that has divided opinions on the legality as enshrined in the Constitution, the declaration of a state of emergency, and going even further to suspend democratic rule. Many look at Chief Olusegun Obasanjo as then president and the situation in Plateau State Jos when he suspended the then governor Joshua Chibidare. People said it set the precedence for what we see today. A view that was also criticized by the then governor of Lagos State, His Excellency now President Bola Tinubu. Now, down the line, people are saying he is also told the party once condemned. What's the hope going forward? That the Constitution can speak clearly to such proclamations? Would it be legal in some way to declare emergency and suspend democratic rule?
Well, I think that the case in Plateau and the case in Rivers
totally different.
are totally different. The issue in Rivers is Rivers was not at war, but the two arms of government were at war. And to an extent, you could say for almost a year or more, the State House of Assembly, which should be the organ representing the people and ensuring proper functioning of the state, was in comatose or was non-existent as far as the governor then was concerned. There is no way 3 or 4 people can legislate in a house where you should have 30. That is not 10%, it's not even 5%. And so to a large extent, you want to say that if you cannot get 2/3 or at least, even if you are saying an emergency meeting, you should have 1/3 of the members of the house. So if you cannot get 10 people, I really don't think that whatever happened in Rivers over that period, it was more, in my opinion, of rascality than having things done. So if we are comparing the two scenarios are different, and the procedures that have been taken and have been followed were also different. In Rivers case, there has been court pronouncement that establishes that there is no governance. So if the court has said there is no governance, and the people on ground have not been able to do things the right way, I think that having an emergency at that level will become relevant. And the president has gone the way of the National Assembly. If, however, anybody thinks different, the Supreme Court is always there to decide that, okay, was this sufficient to have happened or was it not sufficient? Yes, to a large extent, if there is anything in the Constitution that we think is not clearly defined, then the provision is that when the Supreme Court makes a pronouncement, that becomes the reference point for that kind of situation. And I think in this case, nobody has been able to go up to the Supreme Court to get a decision that say, hey, Mr. President, your action was illegal.
Now, the president himself has justified his action, although he noted that there are over 40 court cases pending over that proclamation. You've talked about the role of the Supreme Court here in adjudicating over these cases. Would we be seeing any judgments issued in that direction, or you think now that there's been a reinstatement, those cases might somewhat go under the bridge?
Well, the cases will be of no effect, even when result in the immediate. However, having them properly determined can form a basis and a reference point for future occurrence. So I think that the cases should not be withdrawn. It's just that the prayers will have to change, because you no longer can remove somebody who has already handed over. Because some of the requirements were for them to declare that the administrator should be removed and all that. That by now is no longer valid.
It has lost its substance.
He is no longer there. But however, the decision as to whether what was done was procedurally right or procedurally wrong, I think that decision will still subsist. So if that decision is taken at the level of the Supreme Court, you know that for future reference, there is a reference point to say that the Supreme Court in this matter has said that this is what ought to be done or what not ought to have been done. But as for the case of Rivers, the 180 days or the 6 months, it's over.
Wow, interesting developments. We'll look at the office of the sole administrator, because there's some reports making the rounds. Reports are that some of his aides are making trouble over what they call unpaid entitlements following the conclusion of a 6 months period. Overarchingly, How would you view his time in office in those 6 months? The most recent action he did was the swearing in of 23 local government council chairmen. If you're to review his performance over the period of 6 months, how would you rate him?
Well, his job was more of making peace and stabilizing the system. And in my opinion, I think that over the period, there has been some measure of stability in Rivers State. At least nobody is moving to demolish House of Assembly complex. Nobody is moving to a lot of the infighting, at least, has come to still. And what I would expect is that when they resume today, they will begin to do things as it should be done in the interest of the people of the state. And as for so for me, I think that in stabilizing the environment, he possibly has done what needed to be done. Now, when you come to the issue of AIDS or no AIDS, he doesn't pay anybody by cash. And I would want to ask the question, if they have not been paid for 6 months, why did they wait until the last day of the administrator before complaining? And besides, the state did not employ them. They were nationals, they were civil defense staff, or they were police staff deployed to that place. So somebody is their commander, somebody is responsible for their deployment, and I'm sure that there is a procedure for their payments to have been done. And so if somebody is keeping their money, I think that holding the administrator to ransom or making noise at the gate shouldn't subsist. They should have raised the question along the line. It's been 180 days. So, and then they need to know from their commanders, are they going to be paid for the special duty at the end of it, or they are to be paid on daily, because definitely their salary goes to the government. And even if there are allowances, I want to believe that there are procedures and processes for payment. It is not the governor that paid, or the sole administrator that paid them one by one. So they should channel their complaint to their system, and if they need be, they could even go to court. But staying at the gate and making noise, the governor did not post them there. They were employed. For me, if you end up even trying them for indecent behavior, it will not be wrong, because they have a reporting authority, they have a reporting system, they have a complaint channel. So it is only their commander who can say, oh, the state did not give us money. But if that is not coming from their commanders, then it is between them and their commanders how whatever has happened to their money. So what we need to possibly do investigatively is to check, are there provisions for them? Who got the provision? That investigation, of course, should be launched at that level and should be done at that level, and whoever has been culpable should be tried. But I don't think you can hold the outgoing administrator responsible for people at the gate who didn't get their allowance.
All right. Let's talk about another figure in this debate. Many continue to point fingers in the direction of the FCT Minister, His Excellency Bryson Nyesom Wike, as holding sway in everything that has played out. In reaction to this reinstatement, he's hailed the president for his intervention. He's talked about building on the peace that is currently going to be enjoyed in Rivers State. But looking forward, in the last 6 months, would you say that in some way the people of Rivers State lost out on it? Was there a breakdown in the pace of development, if you consider it from that angle, or in terms of even the state's position where it lies alongst the political dichotomy?
Well, has there been gain? Yes. I think that the horse trading and the heating up the polity had ceased for the 6 months. I also believe that both the House and the governor and their supporters would have had time to reflect that, look, we lost 6 months and it cannot be regained, because when they should hand over in 2027, if they are not re-elected, they must what? Hand over. So the 6 months is lost. The crisis period in the past was also some lost gain for the state. Now, when you come to infrastructure, yes, we may say that there was some slowdown, but you expect the slowdown because the administrator came, there was no budget on ground. The court having declared both the 2024 budget and the 2025 budget of the state not properly passed means that there was no budget on ground.
The sole administrator had to
So
represent the project,
prepare a budget and forward same
To
to
National
the National Assembly. And I'm sure you know that it was more than 4 months into his reign, even before the budget was ready. I'm not even sure that he was able to commence implementation of the budget till he left. So to a large extent, we know that budgeting cycle is one, fund releases is another. And so if we're talking about development, I think that even with him, things would be better than it would have been if the governor had continued. Because if the governor had continued, we don't know what state they would have been by now or a month from that time. Because there would have been impeachment, there would have been all manners, and there would have been escalation of crisis. So to me, yes, certain things might have slowed down, but that is also a lesson for the people, especially the people of Rivers, the stakeholders in Rivers, to know that there is a limit to how you allow external influences. People were coming from different parts of the nation, supporting this camp or supporting that camp, and I believe that those supports were not coming out for free. Money are definitely involved, even if it's only paying 5 flight tickets. When you pay flight ticket for 5 people and you put them in hotel, you won't spend less than ₦1 million per day. Now imagine minimum wage that you can pay with 1 or 2 million naira. So to a large extent, it is a loss for the people of Rivers State, and they need to clearly sit down and consider at every point in time what is the way forward for us, what is in the best interest of the state, as against rather than no, we must hold this individual down, we must make sure this one cannot do this, we must mitigate the power of this, mitigate the power of that. We've seen that happens a number of times in the nation, where you think, okay, we need to bring down this guy, and in the process you're actually killing the nation, or you're killing the state or you're killing a sector because you are fighting
an individual.
Mr.
Ben, before we change topics, one last question on this subject matter. You've talked about keeping a nationalistic view above personal vendetta.
Yeah.
The APC candidate in the last Gube elections in Rivers State, Mr. Toye Cole, made headlines on one of the newspapers mocking the returning governor as one lacking power. One of the newspapers as well, the New National Star, called him a beautiful bride, saying that there will be courtship from the APC to join their fold down, much as the PDP is still claiming ownership. In your honest opinion, what do you think is the political future of Governor Sim Fubara? Would he be tempted to decamp to the APC, or should he still remain loyal to the PDP?
Well, he is not alone. That's what I believe. He's got his fan base, he's got his support base. And I want to believe that whatever political direction he would choose to do, he needs to connect with his own people. Yes, we knew he's not a core politician prior to now, but I think that the event of the last 2 years should have at least matured him in political direction. And so based on that, he needs to look at who are his allies, where is best for him and his team to be, vis-a-vis the future of the state. Where is it that you are sure that the state bread will be better buttered? And based on that, he can take his decision. As far as I'm concerned, whether it's APC or the only difference between APC and PDP that I have known is that PDP is more of an establishment environment where people use the system to work for them. APC to an extent give you some measure of freedom of individuals trying to fight for the organization they belong to. The PDP, for me, use the system to the benefit of their party. And that's why when they are not in government in any environment, they tend to not be able to galvanize any activity.
Now, Mr. Ben, let me draw your mind back to what happened at the annulled River State local government elections. As much as it was seen as a PDP APC battle, there was some insinuations that the governor influenced an underdog in that local government election that clinched almost all the council seats. Do you recall? Do you think when you talk about his allies now, that structure that was used in the annulled local government election might be a key factor in this debate?
Well, if the structures are still intact, there is what in Nigeria you call the friend of office. And when dynamics in the office change, the friend of office also continue to change. Yes, we know that in local government election to a large extent, the governor seems to be, because he appoints who and who will be in SIEC. And so if the governor does not endorse or permit you, the chances are that you are not going to be there. So his showing in that last election that he organized and maybe became annulled show clearly that he had issues with some of the people in PDP, and of course he was not in tandem, of course, with the APC. We expect that as the main opposition party, that is giving him issues. And of course he came up with his own people and they won election. The question today will be, are those people still in that party? Is he AP or AP? I can't even remember the name of the party now. Are they still there? Action was he? Is he AAC?
Yes.
AAC. So are the people still there? Are they still for him? Or they just came that time ad hoc to just show that, okay, because I am the governor, I can do and undo. And I think that the end result from the court shows that, yes, you are the governor, you can do and undo, but if you do not follow the processes and procedures, you can end up being challenged and being boxed out of the situation. So like I said, he needs his people, he needs to consult widely and need to be sure what direction will favor the people that he tends to rule and govern, and what will that be in the best interest of the state. But I know that his colleague governors in the PDP are, of course, opposed to using the resources of their state to fund the party.
All right, Mr. Ben, at this point, we'll take a minute. We'll go on a quick commercial break. When we return, other issues in the news make the round. Stay with us.
The global business is never static. Watch the market report on ADBN TV for business information, latest happening business deals, government economic policies, stock, crude oil and commodity trading, financial upstick and downstick, and the world of organized private sector. The market report showing on ADBN TV 1 to 2 p.m. Monday to Friday. The market report bringing you up to speed in the business world.
Welcome back to Morning Express. Our next issue in the news to deliberate on is following a news conference in Abuja yesterday. A comment made by the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Mr. Wale Edun, where he announced that over the last 9 months, a total of 330 billion naira has been disbursed to 8.1 million vulnerable households under the National Social Safety Net program. Now, when we talk about the course of lifting millions out of multidimensional poverty, debates are on, do we have an accurate national social register? Who are the beneficiaries? What's the modalities for selection as to who constitutes a vulnerable household? These debates have over time shaped a lot of divided opinions on the transparency and accountability in such government programs. But notwithstanding, it makes for good debates on the program this morning. I'll come back to you, Mr. Ben. Each time the government talks about conditional cash transfers, a number of school of thoughts think about it from the opinion of palliatives. can we have better social safety nets? What's the genuinity of this initiative? But listening to the minister talk about 330 billion naira in the last 9 months, let's get your assessments.
Well, basically, if you ask me, are such things required? I would not say no. Yes.
Okay.
But how do we determine the social register? That's where I have my issues. Yes, you can gather evidence and are verifiable, but I think that, and some of us have always insisted, we need a better proof that these registers are genuine. And one of the easiest way to do it, we keep saying it. I don't know what name the government will call them, but I think that from the federal level, if possible, let's have people who are appointed and who are resident in the various electoral ward of the nation. So maybe across the 8,809 or thereabout electoral wards that we have, you have a staff. He lives there. Before you employ them, make sure that they are either resident there or they are ready to go and reside there for the purpose of the job. And I keep saying that issues of palliative, therefore, should be handled by such staff. You give them something like an office or a public place. Almost everywhere you will find a post office or a comprehensive health center and stuff like that. So it could be the primary health care, you will find them in small space or in the post office or any other public building, as the case may be. Now they need to display the register, the social register of their constituent at that ward level. So it means that if you don't want your name on the list, because it should be a board that everybody can go and vet.
Just the way we have in elections.
Just the way you have your voters card. Let's have our social register made public. So you are saying, okay, these are the 100 or the 50 most vulnerable people in this electoral ward, which is verifiable by the people of the ward. So that you are not just giving 1 cup of rice to somebody who can afford a bag of rice, when there is actually somebody who cannot afford a grain of rice. Now, that is one. So one of their functions is to put together the social register. Who says they cannot even register the farmers for you? Who says they cannot help you to collate what is the fertilizer need at that level? Who says the Ministry of Agri cannot train them and use them for some measure of extension service, because they are going to be resident in the community? And who will suggest that their first initial appointment should always be 3 to 4 years, after which if they get promoted, you can move them to any other ministry. But at the level of being there, they set up the social register. They help you in knowing who are the farmers or what the people do. And so whatever data you are getting is coming directly from the grassroots and can be challenged at that level. So if you are now going to have a national platform where all these records are uploaded, that will also be great. But we are going to have a verifiable list. And from month to month or quarter to quarter, the list can actually change, because the status of people will always change.
All right, Mr. Ben. Well, at this point, would break this conversation to pay special interest to a developing story from Delta State. You would recall sometime last week, the memo around dress code for civil servants made the round. We'll be hoping on the program this morning to get in touch with the Commissioner for Information, who holds a dual office in Delta State. He also doubles as the Commissioner for Work, Rural Roads. And he'll be talking to us about that and the state government's visit to Brazil. Whilst we go on this break, we'll just reference what the Minister of Finance said. He said that there are plans to institutionalize cash transfer into the budget to ensure continuation, 330 billion naira in 9 months. What does this make for in terms of the national social safety net? Time will tell. We'll go on a break, and when we return, we'll hope to establish that connection with our commissioner in Delta States to discuss Delta in perspective of the aforementioned instances. Stay with us.